So of course, before you can learn how to use a defensive handgun efficiently and intuitively, you need to choose one that you're actually going to carry or keep handy in your home or wherever else you may feel the need to have a firearm in order to potentially defend yourself or others. There's always going to be a compromise when it comes to choosing a defensive firearm, particularly a defensive handgun. As we said earlier when we talked about combat accuracy, we can't expect one bullet from any particular handgun to automatically stop a threat. So it's going to be a compromise between the size of gun, the accuracy of a gun, the caliber of a gun, the comfort of a gun, our preference for a gun. There's going to be a lot of different things to take into consideration. But what I want to do is talk a little bit about the different types of guns first and give us an idea of what we have to worry about in terms of operations and mechanics. Because, of course, to be efficient and intuitive, we want to have the least amount of mechanical need to operate the gun. We already talked about loss of fine motor skill during a dynamic critical incident, things like that. So taking all that into consideration, we can take a look at the table and see a wide variety of guns that have sort of grouped into certain types. First, let's take a look over here. You know, we've got a series of guns here that may look very familiar to some people, and some people may shoot these types of guns. In fact, I shoot several of these guns relatively frequently, but they're not the best choices for defensive firearms. Some guns are just too slow, too big, meant for target shooting, or just ridiculous for defensive use. Now, that's really not their intended purpose, and they wouldn't be practical guns to have. You certainly could use them. They'd be better than nothing, but not primary choices. If we take a look over here, we've got our duty type weapons, what I like to call. They're double and single action. They have decockers and or decockers in safety, meaning that once the gun goes into single action mode, we're going to have to use this switch here, or one of the other guns a little differently, to either put the gun into a safe mode or at least get it back into a double action mode. These guns are used a lot by police and military. They are great guns for defensive use, for combative use, but again, they're a little more complicated than some of the guns we're going to look at in a minute, and they're also generally larger and a little heavier, and they're almost always going to be made out of an alloy or solid steel guns. The next thing we're going to look at are the 1911s. Of course, these are favorites of many people. They're great to shoot. They're very comfortable to carry. They're usually very thin guns. They're relatively easy to carry. They're a relatively lower capacity than some of these double-action, single-action guns in most cases. And of course, we have a single-action trigger, which is going to be very crisp, allow for greater precision and greater accuracy, but require the use of this external, manually operated safety as we're going out in the presentation and we're coming back into our ready position. Again, a fine motor skill, which makes this gun a little more complex and maybe not the best choice in a defensive firearm. Let's go back up to the front of the table here, and we have some sub-caliber pistols, 22s, 25s, 32s, things like that. When you choose these guns, it's almost always going to be a matter of convenience, just for carry and concealment. If you live in a warmer climate where you don't have a lot of layered clothing or just t-shirts and shorts kind of weather, you don't want to carry a pack on your waist or something to carry your gun if you have a concealed carry permit. When you're out and about, you want to have something to defend yourself. These sub-caliber guns are always going to be better than nothing, but they're not really going to be our primary choice. We want to stay in the 9mm, 40 caliber, 45 ACP, up in that range. And the fact of the matter is, in a lot of the traditional sub-caliber guns, when you start getting up into maybe like a 380 ACP caliber, you find that there's going to be some 9mm that are subcompact guns that might actually work just as well for you and be concealable and easy to carry. Which brings us back to these more modern design, more efficient, striker-fired, safe-action type pistols. For defensive use, we want to be as efficient and intuitive as we can. We've said that several times. That consistency of thought and process is incredibly important. And these firearms give us the option of simply touching the trigger, pressing the trigger, and having them go bang, taking our finger off the trigger, going back into the ready position, and having a safe firearm in our hands. Unlike the more complicated guns that require a separate manipulation of a decock or a safety, these are really much more intuitive, and I think a better choice in a defensive firearm. You know, most of our police and military agencies are switching over to this type of firearm, realizing that it's just that much more convenient when someone is in the middle of a dynamic critical incident to not have to worry about those fine motor skills and other things that are involved in some of the other choices that we have in defensive firearms. And that, of course, brings us back to the ultimate in simplicity and efficiency, the revolvers. When it comes to a defensive firearms choice, there really is nothing simpler or more reliable than a revolver. Something like this, which is going to be a larger model, which would be great for home defense or to have maybe in the office. You might want to carry it, but generally this is going to be a bigger, heavier firearm to carry for self-defense, which of course brings us down to something like this much lighter 38 caliber small revolver. In fact, this is the firearm that I carry for self-defense when I carry one most of the time. And this is just a great choice, very convenient to carry in a pocket holster or any other configuration. When you pull the trigger, it's going to go bang, and when you don't pull the trigger, it's not going to. It's got a relatively long and heavy trigger pull, so it's not going to go off accidentally. And it's just the ultimate in convenience and efficiency when it comes to a defensive firearm. This overview that we see, the vast array of defensive firearms that people might choose, really comes down to finding the compromise that works for you. Once you find the type of gun, whether it's a 1911 type single action gun, a double single, or one of these safe action type guns, a revolver, then of course you have to decide which brand, which make, which model, which caliber. When it comes to caliber, what we're really looking at is firearms like this one here are available in more than one caliber and basically exactly the same size. So you have to decide on a capacity issue, on a recoil management issue basis, what gun you want to carry. And that's going to be a decision that you make, honestly, by going to the range and shooting and actually trying the gun out. Firing a 9mm, firing a 40 caliber, and deciding if recoil management or higher capacity is your personal preference on that compromise. When we go to which brand and which make, honestly, once you have a firearm that you like, that you shoot well, that you can manage the recoil well, that you can carry conveniently, then it's a matter of personal preference. And I do think personal preference is an important consideration when you choose a defensive firearm. Let's face it, if you like the firearm, you're going to shoot it more. If you're comfortable with the firearm, you're going to enjoy training more. And if you're proud of the gun you own, you're going to take it to the range more and go to competitions and shoot with your buddies and basically be glad to have that firearm with you. So while that may be a behavioral, superficial level of firearms choice, I think it's also valid. And once you make an efficient choice, you should then have a gun that you like also when you're choosing a defensive firearm.